Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hi, my name is Steve Bowman, and I was lucky enough to be the drummer on August and Everything After by Counting Crows. We are going to talk about that record and more on My Weekly Mixtape with Brian Colburn.
Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, a podcast that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn. Over the last 100 episodes and change, I've had the chance to talk to some incredible musicians that are responsible for some of my favorite songs and albums, and tonight is no exception to the rule, as I'm truly honored to welcome Steve Bowman, the original drummer and one of the founding members of the Counting Crows, to dive into one of my favorite albums of all time, August and Everything After. Steve, welcome to the program, my friend.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Well, I always like to start by asking my first-time guests, what does the word mixtape mean to you?
Yeah, mixtapes are probably, the original meaning's probably forgotten, but I would say a mixtape is the original Spotify playlist, right? Only it took a lot more effort. You had to create record a bunch of songs and put them on a tape. And the beauty of it was the originality of it. It could be exactly the songs in the order you wanted. And in that way, that's what I do now with Spotify. So I don't know.
It's definitely evolved over the years, for sure.
Mixtape seems to me to be an 80s term.
As a child of the 80s, I'd say that's a pretty accurate description, so I'll go with it.
It maybe at least originated in the 80s. Yeah.
There you go. Now, before we dive into the album, can you talk about how the August and Everything After lineup of the Counting Crows came together, and maybe something about the writing sessions that led us into the album recording?
Well, sure. Adam and Dave Bryson had written a lot of the songs before I got there. And they were performing as a duo and decided for a variety of reasons that they wanted to put a band together. Well, the reason was that they got some label interest in a fluke performing as a duo, and they gave a guy their demo tape, and he sent it to a friend who called. And so they had this little spark come up, which faded, but it inspired them to put a band together at that point. So I had been doing sessions in Dave's studio. Dave Bryson had Dancing Dog Studios, which was a great 16-track 2-inch and sounded really pro. And so my band did a record there, and I could work with a click track, and not many drummers could. So Dave kept calling me back in. He said, "Hey man, we got 4 songs we're doing with this band and their drummer can't do it. And so can you do it?" And so Dave and I had a relationship that way. Matt Malley, who would be the bassist, was in Dave's old band called Mr. Dog. And so he was a local guy. And then Charlie Gillingham was a keyboardist that played, I can't remember the name of his band, but like Charlie was kind of known for playing a B3 live and like carrying it into a club, and he was cool. So when they put the band together, that was the original idea, was to get us 5 together. And we got together and we rehearsed. Well, we played, we jammed, we played the songs that they had recorded on the demo tape, and it just went really well. We all liked each other, and musically it was a great fit. And so after 2 weeks, we went and recorded some songs, and I can't remember all of them, but one of them was Einstein on the Beach for an Eggman. I can't remember the exact title. That song was on a compilation that did real well. I think it got a lot of radio spins. But the thing was, it was recorded 2 weeks after we got together in Dave's studio. And so it felt like the band kind of hit on all cylinders. We'd all played in a bunch of bands, and we all liked the same styles, and the songs were amazing. The original demo tape I got from Dave to learn the songs and audition kind of originally was, they were amazing songs. And I would sit there listening to them, think, man, I really want to do this. I love these songs. And so I think we all did. And so that was a great start. It kind of felt like, we were all doing a bunch of different things. And it kind of felt like, wow, this is something I want to put everything and do for a while. So that was the five of us. And that's how it began.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're gonna love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Well, I want to touch on Einstein on the Beach because you had mentioned the DGC Rarities Volume 1 compilation. I had that CD growing up as well. And
that's what it was on.
Was there a reason Einstein was left off of August? Because even though it was an outtake per se, it still ended up hitting number 1 on the U.S. Alternative Airplay chart. And in Australia, it ranked number 47 on the Triple J Hottest 100 for 1994, which was actually one spot higher than Mr. Jones.
Wow.
I always was surprised that Eggman wasn't on the actual album.
Well, it was recorded at a different time. I mean, obviously, it was recorded 2 weeks in. And so I don't think sonically it would have matched as well. The other thing is that, well, I guess there's a few things. The original songs that ended up becoming the demo that kind of got the band signed, it was the songs I heard and then some more we recorded. And then that became the demos. There was a label that wanted to just release that. They're like, this is it, man. Let's do this. And Adam, I remember saying, well, he thought we could probably do better because we'd been playing together at that point for a year and a half. We'd been playing the songs. And of course we did. And the demo was great, but we were able to take our time and work with a producer and kind of a big budget and really get exactly what we wanted to hear. So that's what we did.
Well, speaking of that, the album was produced by T-Bone Burnett. Can you talk about what he brought to the sessions and maybe what you learned from him?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you always learn from producers, but T-Bone is amazing, especially with young bands. He does a lot of kind of first records or second records with bands. And he did so much for us. We, especially as a drummer, I came in with way too many notes, as many young drummers do. And he was able to trim that. But the story I love telling about T-Bone that affected me personally was, and kind of exemplifies why he's so great or what's so great about him. One of the things, we were recording Omaha. And since these titles, I'll just go right in. Omaha was a song we'd been playing for a long time. And I had a drum part and I was set and ready to record it. We were all getting ready to track it. And T-Bone says into the microphone, "Hey, Steve, take your cymbals off. We're going to do it without cymbals." I was like, "What?" He goes, "Put your cymbals on the floor and we're going to record it." I was like, "Okay." And then it's like, "All right, here we go." And I was like, "Wait a second." I mean, I needed my cymbals for what I was going to play because I had parts with cymbals in them. And so I went into the kitchen and got a pan and I put the pan on one of the toms and I thought, all right, that'll be the rides. I had this ride cymbal part I wanted to play. Anyway, stuff like that happened. And well, I grabbed instead of drumsticks, I used something that sounded better without what I was doing. The bottom line is T-Bone stopped me from recreating a part I'd already known and played well and was proud of, and got me creating a new part with limitations I wasn't used to. And I had to listen and make music on the spot. And with the sounds I had, it changed the part. And the part was great. And it wasn't anything I could have created on the fly unless I'd been under the pressure that he just so casually put me under without even realizing it. It's like, that was an example for me of a producer who's been around the block, kind of working with a young drummer and kind of sneaking a great track out of him, because that track has sounds and parts that I wouldn't have done.
Well, the first thing then I want to bring up, being we're on Omaha, let's just stay there. The 4 thunderous thumps that lead into the song. I've always wondered, is that like a mallet on a floor tom or a kick drum? Because that is a big sound. It jumps out at you when you listen to that coming out of round here.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's a 18-inch bass drum. And I mean, they wanted to record, and I wanted it to sound like TR-808. I wanted it to go boom, right? I wanted to create that long decay. And I had that mallet, and it was a bass drum, and I wanted to hit it like a tom, so I had to jam something under it. So it was kind of precarious. I had to hit it in a way so it didn't fall over, and I hit it with a mallet, and I hit it, and it sounded totally different than I wanted, and I wanted it to go and now it just sounds like this big poof. In hindsight, it's fine. It's great. But there again, T-Bone's dropping the cymbals forced me into doing things I wasn't used to, and that's what it ended up being. So,
well, another thing that always blew me away, and this probably speaks to the album as a whole, but I'm just going to use Omaha as an example right now, is the separation of the instruments in this recording. If you want to focus your ears when you're listening to this song on the mandolin, the accordion, the guitar, the vocals, your drums, everything has its own specific place in the mix. And there's so much separation between the instruments. The band truly immerses you in the song. Were there certain techniques that T-Bone used during the recording to make that separation happen?
yes, what he taught us was to play parts. When we got there, we were all kind of playing the same rhythms and melodies on our instruments, on our respective instruments. And a great example was Mr. Jones. We were all going, we were all punching that those ands. And he said, why don't you do that? You don't do that. And then you do something in the middle. And so then we heard it back and we're like, oh, that sounds a lot better. And so then you go to record the next song and everybody's like, well, hey guys, we're kind of doing the same thing. What if you do this, Joe? And so he taught us to play parts. Instead of everyone playing together, we all played different things within the same rhythm and chord progression and the same attitude and feel. And it just makes it a lot more interesting. Another thing that he did was everything was recorded with minimal effects. And so his thought was you get a great microphone and you get a great guitar sound. Done, And so rather than just scoop up everything and say, yeah, we'll get everything dialed in later, you're committing early to the sounds you get. And then there's, I always feel like a lot of records have certain styles or effects that kind of pigeonhole them into the era they came out. I always mention Don Henley. Like, I love Don Henley, but his solo stuff, it's like, there's the snare drum, there's the, it's like, that's 86, that's 87, And so by just recording a great sound without using the effects of the day or the latest, greatest, it's a different way to do it. It's not, yes, 90120, but it's good in a different way.
It definitely gives the album a timeless nature, which I think is what resonates with me so much.
Well, and I think about a lot of the records I love now, and they're the ones that stick around. And it comes down to people playing together, just playing simple parts, locking into something and making a beautiful sound, And so I don't necessarily need the cool gizmos that I loved so much when they came out in hindsight,
Well, you were talking about a song earlier, so we might as well just move on to that next, and that is Mr. Jones. This is the one song for the people that sat and read the liner notes over and over again in the 90s that you don't play drums on this song. It's actually Denny Fongheiser. Can you talk about how that came to be?
Well, that was completely my fault. I was not very flexible. And I look back and kind of think that part of the what value of my drumming was maybe the cockiness of it, but the detriment of it was I wasn't able to adjust as well to criticism or maybe new ideas that maybe I was afraid I couldn't pull off. And Mr. Jones was that. And I'll tell you, I've thought about and kind of talked about it before. So I kind of have an idea of what happened now. But I was playing Mr. Jones. Now, I should say, I didn't like the song. And I didn't like it from the get-go. And for me, it was the tempo and the chord progression. I always felt it sounded just kind of silly, corny. I didn't get it. Now, that's a weakness of mine. But obviously the song is great. People loved it, right? But that was how I felt about the song. I was even stupid enough to tell Adam once, I said, man, because I loved the other songs so much. And I once told Adam, I was like, man, I love these songs so much. And then I hear Mr. Jones, I just can't figure out how that fits in this situation. And he's very offended, as he probably should have been. But yeah, I never got it. So when we went to record Mr. Jones, I played it with a quarter note feel. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but I was just basically smashing my hands down and going, but I didn't care. I wanted to get it over with so we could record another song, Live, I always thought, yeah, all right, well, let's get this done and then we can play the one I love, But it wasn't working. It wasn't grooving. It didn't fit the feel. And I didn't understand how to change it. And a weakness of mine was that I was trying to be cocky music school drummer. Like, how could I not do it? Well, the trick was Denny Fongheiser, who's a, veteran, he's done all kinds of hit songs. He came in and he played it with an eighth note feel. And what that did was change the groove in the way it needed. And so he was, he just put more eighth note. I was playing it with a quarter note. The feel changed and everything was perfect. It was what they were, in hindsight, in my defense, Adam had a tough time explaining that. He didn't say, well, play it with an eighth note feel. Maybe, I don't think he did, because that didn't occur to me for some reason. But that was the simple trick. And so what happened was that they asked me to re-record it. And I just said, man, I don't know what I'd do differently, And that was where I should have just been gutsy enough to try something. And it probably would have ended up being an eighth note feel. But Denny was coming in to do percussion on the record. Again, I considered myself a drummer more than a percussionist. In hindsight, I probably should have got into that more. But that's all right, because Denny is an amazing percussionist. And so he was coming in to do percussion, and we decided, hey, man, let's have him give a pass on Mr. Jones. Well, of course, whatever he does is going to be perfect, and that's what happened. So anyway.
Well, being that ended up being the debut single from the album, I feel like I should follow up by asking, how much was the label involved in choosing the singles for this album? Because like you said before, it wasn't your most favorite song, at least upon first listen. And as time has shown, a lot of these album cuts have just as strong of an impact amongst Counting Crows fans as do the four singles.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, I wasn't in on that, and I didn't have any say in that. But I know that Gary Gersh was the executive producer, our management company, maybe T-Bone. The idea, of course, when you're releasing an album is to kind of introduce it in a certain way, see what happens, and then depending on what happens, the idea was to go Mr. Jones round here, and then that's when Einstein on the Beach hit big. And I remember that was not part of the game plan. And so that was the last single that was allowed from August and everything after. As I remember, maybe they did Rain King. I can't remember.
I thought Rain King and A Murder of One were also released as singles, but I don't think there were videos made for those.
Yeah. Einstein altered the trajectory in some way that caused the releases to maybe change. And maybe I'm wrong.
Well, as someone who played on the album, then I guess I have to follow up by asking, are there any songs on this album that you feel maybe should have gotten a push as a single that you felt might have been stronger than the 4 that were released?
Well, I mean, obviously it went just fine, but I always felt that Sullivan Street would be a great, like, from a business standpoint, from like music history, a lot of bands, you can get a song, a second song, maybe a third song, and then you hit them with a ballad, right? I mean, business wise, that's always how it's gone. Open Arms comes out and Journey Escape or Girl Like You, whatever that foreign, I mean, like this historic ballad. Anyway, I thought Sullivan Street would have been great for that.
Well, you picked my favorite song on the album, so I'm glad to hear that. That's been a song that I did an episode with another podcaster, Ben Montgomery from Records Revisited, and it was on spellbinding songs. And this is one that I chose as a song that always left me spellbound. And I think that's probably because of the way Maria McKee's voice blends with Adam's in the chorus. There's this beautifully haunting vibe going on in this song. I mean, what else can I say? It leaves me speechless every time I hear it.
Well, I have to say I agree. It's the songwriting. I wouldn't say thank you because what I get is the same thing you get, and it's that songwriting. The song is so good. Adam is an amazing songwriter, and for me, everybody has their different tastes, but man, that type of tension and release, that type of beauty, passion, it's melancholy. I mean, that's all I want in a song. So yeah, I always love that one.
Well, I know I talked about the singles being released, but I want to talk about the way this album is sequenced as a front to back listen. Because to me, one of the album's strongest points is the song sequencing. I honestly don't think there is any other order of songs that you can move around that would make this album feel better than the way they were sequenced. Was that T-Bone, the label, Adam? Did they know that Round Here was like the album opener? Like, how did that all come together?
Well, I think, and again, above my pay grade, the sequencing of the album, but I know that Round Here is an obvious opener, and Murder of One is an obvious closer. That's what we did live, so it made sense that was how the record went. And then everything else is, the magic of someone else's hand. Although I will say that people always say, kind of point out that, man, that's a record you can listen to the whole way through. And so I think that's good sequencing. So
Well, you talked about Round Here being the album opener. I do want to bring that one up because that song was originally recorded by Adam's first band, the Himalayans. And if you A-B those two songs back to back, the Himalayans version and the version on August and Everything After, they're two different songs. And I would love to know how the band got together and kind of reimagined it for the Counting Crows version.
yeah, it happened one day at a rehearsal. We were playing the Himalayans version, and it wasn't great and wasn't working. And so we just stopped it and kind of in a frustrated way, we just let it go. And Charlie got it back going. He said, hey, what if we just tried it and do the opposite of what you think you should do and just, and so as a drummer, it would have probably been me trying to emulate Stuart Copeland or Manu Cachet by having that bass drum on the 2 and 4,
Mm-hmm.
and then everybody else did what they did, but it created a vibe that everybody sunk into. And so I think what changed was just, the approach was a change in the vibe and a real like complete change in the vibe. It's kind of like reinvent it,
Mm-hmm.
but since everybody already knew the chord progression, everybody knew we could just kind of sail through it in that way. And I think the first time we played it was that way. And it was just like, oh man, that's great. Well, great in that it saved it for us because we weren't doing it well the other way. So,
Well, I want to bring up something on this version that always impressed me, and it's something that I think you do throughout the entire album on the drums. And that is, I'm going to use the "Round Here We Stay Up Very Late" crescendo. Normally you would picture a drummer doing a massive fast fill over that part, but you dialed it back where it was just a couple of nuanced snare hits, and it actually made the song more impactful and powerful than had you played something bigger in that moment. And I've always wondered, was that your thought process in this? Was that part of what you were talking about earlier with what T-Bone was telling you to do in these songs?
Well, in that case, it really would have been me just being so into the song that I forgot to be noodly. That's how good those songs were for me. And I always tell, if I work with young drummers, I tell them, if you can do what you think the singer would do, if the singer were playing drums, you'll be fine. And in that case, I think I was there were a few times when I would be so dialed into Adam's lyric and vocal rhythm and whatever that I would be kind of playing it, or I would be it, kind of fall into the spell of the song and then forget your drumming and more just reacting to the emotions and feelings that the music inspires. That's what I think great musicians do. I don't do that much, but great songs like that allowed me to forget I was a drummer playing drums.
Well, you brought up Stuart Copeland, so I have to go to this question next, because when I was growing up, I always felt like this song had just a hint of Stuart Copeland influence in what you were doing. And I mean that in the most positive way possible. And that is what you do in Anna Begins, because that beat's one of my favorites on the record. It's, as I like to call it, subtly complex. And when you listen through a good set of headphones, I get lost in all the nuances that you're doing. And it's so intricate. It really takes this track to new heights. So if you wouldn't mind, I have a terrible pun here, and I apologize, but I don't. Could you break down that groove that you're playing in Anna Begins?
Yeah, that was, well, again, that song, I just love that song so much. And especially when it gets big at the end and there's things coming in and going out and building and a new plateau above a new, all these, it gets so big in the end that as a drummer, once again, you're really just dancing on that and not thinking about what you're playing. And so it kind of creates a random style to the patterns of the cymbals, maybe, because instead of thinking left, right, left, right, left, left, right, right, you're just kind of, dancing, swinging your arms, just like throwing your head back, that's what it became. But I don't know if that answers the question. To be technical, I would say that was me trying to sneak my music school stuff into a song, and it worked because of the song, the way it is. And that song had been recorded before with another drummer named Toby Hawkins, a friend of ours in Berkeley, and he did kind of a paradiddle thing, if you know what that is. You probably don't. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know. I'm a musician as well, so I do know that one.
So yeah, I kind of built off that and then tried to forget I was playing it and just do it.
Well, earlier in the night, you had mentioned that Adam wrote a lot of these songs and brought them to the band. However, you have a writer's credit on Time and Time Again. So can you talk about your role in how that song came together?
Well, that was a funny one because we were meeting with different producers, and we met with Don Dixon, and we went out to breakfast with him and hung out. And then we went back to the studio, and not everybody was back from breakfast. And Matt Malley and I were ready to go. And I think Charlie was playing somebody, but Don Dixon, I think, was playing something. And we just started doing that, boom, boom, just kind of doing that as people showed up. And so everybody showed up when we started working on it, and it became Time and Time Again. So I think that's why I got writing credit.
Awesome. Well, One of the songs that I want to bring up next is one that over the years the band has reinvented live, and it's different than the album version, and that's Rain King, as the version that is on Across a Wire as well as the Amsterdam live album is a stripped down slow acoustic version. And then you've got the album version that's really upbeat and energetic. As far as I'm concerned, it's two different experiences, same lyrics, same notes, but they draw from different emotions. Was there a preferred version? Obviously, I understand that the fast version made the album, but given the amount of times the slow version's been played live, I have to assume there's an affinity for that version as well.
Well, in my experience, there was only the fast version, and then slowly live, I mean, you get to a venue, maybe it's a perfect moment and that happens. But at that point, we didn't, I don't think we considered it like, should we do the slow version or the fast version? We're just like, it was always fast and then every once in a while slow, which was a neat change, you know. But it's a great song, and of course it goes either way. I mean, a lot of great songs can morph into different feelings if you change the tempo or the, you know.
Were there any other songs on the album that you did that with, or was it basically relegated to Rain King?
Well, I can't remember now. I'm trying to think if there were no slow songs that we sped up, so it must.
Right. Yeah. I can't picture the rocket version of Sullivan Street. I don't know.
Yeah. I can't remember. There were cover songs maybe that we played with different feels.
Well, then I'm a huge cover song nerd, so I have to ask, which were your favorite cover songs to play in the band?
Well, early on, we started doing 6 different ways of The Cure, Head on the Door. I love that song, and I thought it was a really cool version. With the instrumentation we had, it always kind of lent itself in a certain way, and I loved the way that sounded. And we did Caravan early on, which was fun, and trying to think, I don't know. They would come and go, you know.
Well, I have to just ask, was there ever a studio version of the slowed down version of Rain King ever recorded?
Not that I know of. Well, not with me. We might have done a TV show and slowed it down or something, but not an album, not that I was a part of.
Okay. Well, there's also the album's title track, which didn't appear on August and Everything After, but in 2019, the band did record a new version of it with a symphony orchestra. And at the time, Adam had said to Rolling Stone, I'm just going to read this quote here. The original was just me on the piano, which was probably a bad arrangement for it. There were holes in the lyrics, and that really weighed it down. The whole thing was just lumbering. We had to toss it. Can you talk about your experience with that song? Was that basically cut and drive what happened, or did you guys really put a lot of effort into it? Because that's the name of the album.
Yeah. My experience was that it wasn't something that we were working on as a band. And so it wasn't something that I was thinking about a lot. We had a lot of songs we're working on. And so, yeah, I always assumed it was a piano song, Adam piano song. And yeah, we didn't work on it. I don't think it was, if it wasn't lyrically ready, there was other stuff that was. And there's a song called Love and Addiction that I just loved. And Adam wasn't sold on the lyrics of something lyrically about it. And so it didn't make the record. We recorded 22 songs for August and Everything After. And so a lot of them had to go, but that was one that was cut. And it was a lyric thing. I'm just a dumb drummer. Ultimately, I love lyrics, but I don't write them. And so I have to just respect that.
Well, I'm glad that Love and Addiction made the 2007 deluxe edition of the album, because that is a great song. So I'm glad that finally saw the light. Now, this next question might be a little off the beaten path, but please hear me out. In 1994, in June to be exact, you and the rest of the Counting Crows were on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. So was it everything that Dr. Hook said being on the cover of the Rolling Stone would be?
Yeah. Well, we were in Europe when that came out, and then we came home, and so the first time I saw it was at the airport, and I mean, I'm sure they had it in Europe. We didn't see it there, but it was exciting, and maybe more importantly, they gave us a great review, and so it really, that had a lot of weight back then and helped push things along. But yeah, it was amazing. I mean,
I was going to say between that and the Letterman performance, I feel like those were two big moments for the band that really kept bringing up a level, because that version around here it sticks out in my brain every time I think of that performance. That had kind of a mix of the energy of the Himalayans version and the album version, because you guys looked like you were so friggin' stoked to be there. That was a lot of adrenaline coming out in that performance.
yeah, I'm really grateful that happened the way it did because, that was the episode that Madonna was on. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
She was on and she swore a bunch of times and it was really weird. Like they couldn't get her off. And so we didn't think we were going to be on the show. We thought she was just going to stay on. We were going to get bumped. And TV's so funny because, we've been playing a lot and we felt pretty tight as a band and we were used to playing shows. And now TV, you sit around and you do one song and you're off. And so I remember that night sitting back there thinking, guys, I don't know if Madonna's going to get off. I don't think we're going to, there was a guy in the room, the fastest grocery bagger in America and he'd been bumped the night before and he would be bumped that night too. But he was sitting there in the backstage with us. And so then it's on and you go on and you got 5 minutes and so that performance was kind of like, I always felt like it was like us putting a whole show into 5 minutes, because we're so psyched to be there. And that's it. You got one shot on TV and then it's so bizarre. I think you record at 5:30 in the afternoon. And so you do one song and then you get off stage and you're like, now you want to play and you go out and eat dinner. It's so bizarre. Watch it later. But yeah, that was a really great boost for the band.
Well, I have talked about August and everything after so many times on this show, and I've talked about it being a timeless album. We talked about it earlier in this episode. Why would you say that so many people feel this way about this album?
Well, one of the things I like to say is you have all your life to write the first record. And the second record you have to write in hotel rooms, living on Subway sandwiches. And it's just, it's tough to do. So I always say how lucky I feel to have been on the first record. I mean, Dave and Adam came up with a great batch of songs and then surrounded themselves with people that got it and tried to further it. And we came up with more stuff. And they, I guess I don't know why that would make it timeless, except that it's honest and authentic. And I think the performances serve the songs because they were that good, I guess that I'd say, I feel like I'm bragging all night, but I'm just trying
Not at all. I would say the exact same thing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm proud of that record. I was lucky to have been there because as I say, it would have done fine with any drummer, it was ready to go.
Well, I will ask, I know you left the band after this album was released. Have you kept in touch with the group since then? Are things copacetic? Over the years, has kind of time healed all those wounds? Because let's be honest, being in a band is the closest thing to a marriage that's actually not a marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we don't keep in great contact, but I love those guys. And I hope that, I hope they think fondly of me. It was a long time ago. And honestly, I needed to mature some. I was young and cocky and wild, and it was great in some aspects, but in hindsight, I would have fired me too. So, and I was upset about it for a couple years, and finally started looking at what I added to things and how I could try to, in hindsight, it was exactly what needed to happen. And how lucky am I all these years later? I mean, it's still doing well. Here we are talking about it. And and it puts some wind in my financial sails every year. And, I'm thrilled.
Well, before we wrap things up for the night, Steve, can you talk a little bit about Murfreesboro Music Lab and how people can learn more about it?
Yes. I moved to Nashville in 2006 and love it here. It's Music City, and it's been a wonderful place. Raised a family here. In 2020, I moved to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is a small town about 35 miles south of Nashville. And I love being in a small town, in a little community, and I ride my bike around, and it's just wonderful. But I needed to do something. And so I started Murfreesboro Music Lab out of my house here. And I work with drummers a lot, but I also work with aspiring musicians, singer-songwriters. And I just try to take folks through and see if I can save them any time, effort, or headache from their careers. Mumulab.org is the website. It's mumulab.org. And then the other thing I always like to talk about is I did a 10-part podcast called Letters to an Aspiring Musician. And it was just me trying to think of everything after a 30-year career. What do I wish I'd known when I was 20? And so I tried to pass that info on in 10 different episodes. And so Letters to an Aspiring Musician is available at a podcast near you.
And I'll be sure to embed that podcast on the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com so people could check that out. Well, Steve, this has been such a pleasure talking music with you tonight. Thank you for your contributions to one of my favorite albums of all time. And more importantly, I'd like to thank you for your time today to join me to wax poetic about this incredible album.
Wow, it was a real pleasure. And I appreciate you being such a fan that you know songs and questions. I mean, that's very flattering for me, and I'm grateful. Thanks for calling.
And for those listening, remember, you can find My Weekly Mixtape on almost all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. You can also head to myweeklymixtape.com to check out the full catalog of My Weekly Mixtape episodes. And finally, if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. There you can enjoy ad-free episodes of the show, chime in on upcoming topics, become a future guest, and so much more. That's all for this week. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, enjoy the tunes.
Hey, this is John Moses and Tyler Morrison from the Fight Stories podcast.
And we want to welcome everyone from Pantheon to check out the podcast that goes from pros to average Joes.
We got MMA champs, boxing champs, NHL tough guys, funniest comedians in the world, and of course, stories from guys like your drunk Uncle Tommy on Thanksgiving.
That's right, because we're the voice of the streets, and we want to hear from you guys, because what's better than hanging out with your crew and reliving the old glory days?
Stories like Rigby, who put that guy's head through a popcorn machine in front of his 5- and 6-year-old son while eating chicken wings at the bar.
It doesn't get any better than that. Everyone has a fight story. We want to hear yours.